We know that CNN is enormously biased. So biased because when you look at some of these clips that we here on the show just dug up, it's pretty startling. And I'm not just talking about the debate moderators. They're bad. I'm talking about the rest of the rank and file. Like this woman who came over from MSNBC. Well, you know how they think at MSNBC. But anyway, she got a spot. Little drifter that she is, going over to CNN. and here she is, just yesterday. By the way, it gets much worse. I'm trying to decide whether I start with the really, really bad one. Why don't I? Okay, let's start with the worst of the worst. So this woman, who's kind of a minstrel player, was at MSNBC. I don't know where she was before that, but she's over at CNN. And she was just lousy on the air yesterday, but it's to be expected. I think that's the point I want to make with you guys, that it is to be expected. You have to understand how the enemy thinks, so to speak. And when I say enemy, anybody who is saying what this woman said about one of our lawmakers. I mean, no conservative would say this, even in their sort of deepest moment when they're so frustrated with the other side. Nobody would wish this on somebody else. And yet this lady, if we can call her that, had to say this about Rand Paul when he was in that altercation back in 2017 with a neighbor. I mean, it was horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. He had 6 broken ribs. And this person had this to say at the time, just so we know how CNN thinks. She was back at MSNBC then. Here, we're going to cue this tape up, Drew.
Details today on the incident that left Senator Rand Paul with 6 broken ribs. This might be one of my favorite stories, although, of course, we don't want to. Clearly, Senator Paul is still struggling. Paul's neighbor, Rene Boucher, is accused of beating the senator, and GQ reports that lawn care issues may well have been at the heart of the dispute. A neighbor told the magazine that Boucher pays about $150 a month for professional landscaping, while Paul maintains his yard himself. I guess that's the libertarian in him. The neighbor also said that part of what bothered Boucher was the difference in grass length between his lawn and that of Senator Paul's. And that Paul sprayed grass
she goes
clipping.
on and on. But the point is, at the top of that clip, you heard her say, this may be my favorite story. I want you to hear it again. I mean, it's her favorite story. Her favorite story. 6 broken ribs on a U.S. senator. Why would you wish that on anyone? I mean, what kind of twisted, perverse person says something like this? Let's play the very tippy top.
Details today on the incident that left Senator Rand Paul with 6 broken ribs. This might be one of my favorite stories, although, of course, we don't want to clearly.
I mean, she catches herself, right? This may be one of my favorite stories. And then she catches herself. Oh, not that we want to. I mean, you put it out there, Casey. You put it out there. Now we know how you really think, which is why it comes as no surprise that you won't let someone who is a spokesperson for Trump say boo, or just the reality of how Donald Trump is walking into a more biased situation than would normally be expected in any kind of quote unquote debate. I mean, we know the liberal media is extremely biased, corporate media being what it is. But it's so bad that you can't even say that. Here we go to that same woman who celebrated disgustingly, sickeningly, the broken ribs of a U.S. senator to now shutting down the opportunity for the Trump spokesperson to tell the truth about who was moderating this debate.
So he's basically saying there, well, will I let Joe Biden win? It does seem as though many Republicans have set the bar very low in terms of arguing that Joe Biden is basically senile. Now you have people like Doug Burgum coming out and saying, well, President Biden's very accomplished, trying to set expectations in a different place. What do you expect from Joe Biden?
Well, first of all, it would take someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently frequently likened President Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay.
Now, as
I'm
for
sorry,
this
guys.
debate,
We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome to come back and speak about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will have equal time to Joe Biden when they both join us now at later this week in Atlanta for this debate. Our thanks to.
God. She's like hyperventilating. I mean, the woman can barely breathe. Oh my God. Somebody said something about Jake Tapper, glorious Jake Tapper. Oh, get over yourself. You could have let her, she actually was moving on, but you wouldn't listen. Too many of these anchors, they won't listen, which is, by the way, why you see her getting so flustered, right? Because it's not in the teleprompter at that point. She's just decided to cut her off. It's not in the teleprompter. She doesn't have anything to read. She doesn't have her questions, which literally are in the teleprompter as well, written by other people. And she's like, oh, she's so angry and she's so frustrated and she's so upset. She's just going to get that lady off the air. Well, Caroline Levitt, good for you. You're trying, but it's very clear. It is very clear that there is a bias on ample display, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to tell you this. CNN is incapable of not showing their bias. And that's dangerous for Donald Trump because he's walking into the lion's den, so to speak. In other words, he goes into that debate Thursday with the odds pretty much stacked against him, in that it's 1, 2, 3 against 1. You have Jake Tapper, notorious liberal. You have Dana Bash, a notorious Beltway insider, both moderating a debate between Joe Biden, who despises Donald Trump, and Donald Trump. So they have the ability to control the microphones, as you just saw, right? They're very proudly like showing this off. Caroline Levitt, the first victim of it. Does Donald Trump become the next? They don't like what Donald Trump is saying. We just cut him. We cut him off. You know, there's no audience there, so they don't have to worry about dazed and confused, looking out into the audience, looking into the sea of people getting distracted by all the clapping and all the noise. You see, he can't focus that way. You saw him the other night, right, at the Juneteenth event. Everybody's dancing quite badly, I would add, especially Kamala. Come on, girl. Like, you got no rhythm? No rhythm at all. Huh. All right, well, Joe has no rhythm at all, but it's not just that. It's that he's old. He's 81 years old, and I'm no doctor, but I've seen dementia before in loved ones. And sadly, he does have, I'm just going to say it. I may get in trouble for this, right? Because I'm not a qualified medical person, but I think anybody who's lived through that with a loved one knows the signs. And one of them is that he's just dazed and confused, looking off into space. And they wanted to avoid that. So there's no audience. CNN controls the mic, and CNN controls the questions. I do believe that the former head of the DNC got trapped up in a little bit of trouble. Wasn't it with CNN? You know who I'm talking about, Donna Brazile, when it turned out that she got the questions ahead of time. How much you want to bet? Biden, who's been working really hard there in Camp David, has got some inkling from some sources at CNN about what's going down on Thursday. He knows what to prepare for. Donald Trump, good luck. But I would just say, how can CNN conduct a debate here with moderators that have attacked Trump so repeatedly, have attacked Democrats, basically for the last 8 years straight? We went and pulled some highlights, and I'm going to show you those in a minute. But keep in mind who you're dealing with. Jake Tapper, career journalist, always network corporate journalist. I believe he was first print, which may explain the nasal voice. You know, they don't really care about their voices, I guess, in print. We'd be better off getting them from radio, for goodness sakes. Anyway, Jake Tapper, he had a history of being extremely liberal, and he's doubled down on that over the years. For example, he spearheaded CNN's Russiagate, Russia coverage, and even co-authored a report, in fact, about the dossier, the infamous dossier, which is now proven to be opposition research, bought and paid for by none other than Hillary Clinton's team via a law firm. And well, an organization that prides itself on its opposition research, Fusion GPS. Additionally, Mr. Tapper has declared as recently as December that, quote, the dehumanizing rhetoric of Adolf Hitler is once again alive and well when referring, you see, to Trump's policy plan for addressing challenges at the border. Meanwhile, you get Dana Bash, who's said all kinds of things and, well, you know, keeps all kinds of company. We're going to get to that in a second. But I just, again, ask, why is Donald Trump doing this debate? I know he wanted to get out there and debate Joe Biden, but I do believe that the odds are very much stacked against him, that this is a kind of trap, if you would, that he is walking into. Trump seems to know that. I mean, he knows the bias that's out there. We heard him in Philadelphia over the weekend highlighting this bias, pointing out that, you know, this guy can barely get out of bed. He's cognitively, it seems, quite impaired, and yet they keep going after Donald Trump. Watch.
But the FBI crime statistics Biden is pushing are fake. They're fake, just like everything else in this administration. Now he's even saying that all his mishaps were fake. They say the fake news covered him in a fake manner. That's a lot of fake news. That's a lot of fake news back there. All we want them to do is be honest, because they're all going out of business. Nobody believes them anymore. And it didn't help when they went along with the Biden scam. What is he called? What does he call it? You know what he calls it? So they get him in about 9 different positions. I mean, even normal positions, although I assume he's been in some very bad ones. But they get him in all these horrible, compromising posts. And then they say it really wasn't that way. It was total. Then everybody sends in, they all have cameras. See, every one of you has a camera. If I blow it up here, though, they take a perfect, brilliant, beautiful statement that I make. I go for 2 hours without teleprompters. And if I say one word slightly out, they say, he's cognitively impaired. Whereas Biden can run into walls. He can fall off the stage. He can fall up the stairs. He falls up. He can turn around. Listen to this. From 20,000 feet, a paratrooper is landing right in front of him. Everybody, all the foreign leaders, they're watching. And he turns around to look at a tree. Right? No. And then they say it was fake. He was fine. And then the press goes along with it. They go along with it. They say, isn't it terrible the way they cover him? No, he's terrible. The worst president in history by far. And we have to get him out, or this country is not going to survive.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, the press, the corporate media, the sort of mainstream media, not this press right here. I've actually always prided myself on being pretty fair. In fact, even when I showed you those clips, remember Joe Biden trying to sit at that event in France for Normandy, and he was trying to sit, and he tried to sit like 4 times. I think 4th time was the charm there. At first, the internet was talking about it. You didn't really know because it looked like there was no chair there. But I always go back to the original tape. I showed you the whole thing. It doesn't matter where you cut that tape. Joe Biden was out of it, okay? I'm glad he had a chair to sit in, but here's the reality. He didn't know what was going on. He just didn't. And you can't call those cheap fakes because you know what? They wouldn't be able to make the cheap fakes, so to speak, in the first place if he wasn't so out of it, if it didn't take him so long to do everything. But again, everything is seen through this lens that's extremely biased. CNN is extremely biased. Its hosts for this debate, moderators, are extremely biased. They are not journalists in the classic sense by any stretch of the imagination, because if they were, they wouldn't be tweeting what they've tweeted. They wouldn't have said what they have said. Jake Tapper, he's up first. Take a look at this, ladies and gentlemen, this little tweet that he retweeted from none other than George Conway. That would be Kellyanne's ex-husband. George Conway is a never-Trumper. Somebody tweeted out, either nobody in the Trump administration has the cojones to tell Trump the truth, or he is 100% insane. There's really not a lot of middle ground, to which, by the way, kind of a gross tweet, right? George Conway then writes, he's 100% insane, and nobody in the administration has the to tell him that. Again, off color. Jake Tapper retweets it. Multiple problems with this, okay? He's calling the guy he's going to now be moderating a debate with as totally insane. I mean, what the heck are you doing? Trump doing this debate. Again, he's a big boy. You know what? He's going to be fine, but it's just not right. And you know what's really annoying? CNN's going to make a ton of money on it. A ton of money on it. CNN is running this one all the way to the bank. Normally, you don't really have commercials during a debate. The whole idea is you go full because it's about providing the American people with the opportunity to gain more knowledge about their candidates. But nope, CNN, desperate as it is, has got a couple of commercial blocks stacked in there. What do you know? I mean, hey, I'm a capitalist, so they ought to be able to do it. But, you know, so much of the communist news network thing is not relevant on a chance when they can make some money off of these guys. So Jake Tapper is who he is. I mean, really unfortunate that he is the way he is. But, you know, he's said multiple times over the years. In fact, I showed you something yesterday where he's just really not in the president's corner by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he just bashes him. He really thinks he's the end of America. He thought that he was the end of CNN because he actually did, ladies and gentlemen, a town hall in Manchester, New Hampshire, before he was named top of the GOP ticket. And you should have seen Jake. It was like he was at a wake or something, just crying his eyes out to Anderson Cooper on live TV. We played that yesterday. Go take a look. Anyway, let's move on to Dana Bash. Dana Bash, who has a long career at CNN. She has been married and I believe divorced a couple times, once to a CNN anchor who is probably still there and I think ran around on her. I don't want to get into it. I mean, ugh. But the first husband, this is interesting. He's like a serious like insider. This is where she gets her name. His name is Jeremy Bash. Now, I don't want to like completely pry into people's private lives, believe me. And I'm going to cut her the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure she's not talking to him all the time. I think it was an early marriage, early in her life, early in her career. But the point is, understand the circle in which she operates, the friends that she has. One would have to assume that, you know, there's other people like the ex-husband in her life, around her life, because she's living in this Washington Beltway and she's in this bubble, right? Where you're kind of only thinking what your friends think. And if these are your friends, well, then I guess we know what you're thinking, as much as you may pretend otherwise. Let's go to the clip of the ex-husband on MSNBC, because this guy, he was one of the ones that was trying to sell this whole ridiculous misinformation story alongside the former deputy head of the CIA. And they were doing it all at the request of none other than Anthony Blinken, trying to tell you that laptop, which Hunter Biden's going down on, even though he's asking for a new trial.
This looks like Russian intelligence. This walks
he's going
like
down
Russian
on this,
intelligence.
guys.
This talks
they tried to tell you that this was real. And he does a pretty convincing job at it. Watch.
Russian intelligence. This effort by Rudy Giuliani and the New York Post and Steve Bannon to cook up supposed dirt on Joe Biden looks like a classic Russian playbook disinformation campaign. Rudy Giuliani is being worked over by Russian intelligence. And then Rudy Giuliani suddenly comes forward with these mysteriously created emails, probably hacked through a Russian intelligence operation. We have to acknowledge the fact that the President of the United States is supporting, is condoning, is welcoming a Russian intelligence operation in 2020. Nicole, this is collusion in...
Okay, so again, the company you keep. She's no longer married to him. She's got that going for her. But one would have to assume, you know what? This is all part of the Washington think, right? The Washington brainwashing. Let's go to her, because she took the opportunity not too long ago to say how unfortunate it was for the American people that they had Donald Trump on the ticket. Couldn't the Supreme Court have taken care of this one, she wonders? Watch.
Here's a question that I have, because it is, again, it seems like the Supreme Court is in a bubble, or perhaps it's some of the justices are in a bubble, and they're not dealing with, I mean, when they say, oh, Congress can do this, there are members of Congress, and we can go through the list, who are never going to do anything that would make life difficult for Donald Trump. So to think that the Congress is going to solve this, they barely can get a post office name these days.
It's true. I mean, and you can go down the list of Supreme Court decisions that kicked whatever issue over across the street over to Congress, whether it is, an Obamacare, which is something that the Democrats were very happy about when they did that, a little bit of a different kind of court. Voting rights, I think, is maybe the primary example of what you're saying before this. Look, unfortunately for America, the court isn't necessarily wrong that this is the way the framers wanted it to be. They wanted Congress.
Unfortunately for America, the court isn't necessarily wrong that this is what the framers wanted. You understand what I'm saying? She hates the guy, for goodness sake. She despises Donald Trump. Jake Tapper despises Donald Trump. Jake has tweeted that he's 100% insane. I mean, this is who Donald Trump is up against. He's got the network complete with their crazies like the woman I showed you earlier. He's got these two moderators, and then he's got Joe Biden himself. Joe Biden, who, by the way, is not much to take on, let's be honest, right? But when you've got the help of the people that are going to go yes, no on the microphone, and you've got the help of the people that are doing the questions and moderating this thing, it becomes suddenly more challenging. Does it not? I love this. This is from the Babylon V. Our friends over at the Babylon V. Seth Dillon's great. He runs this. They wrote, it's satire. Trump preps for debate against Biden by going to nursing home and arguing with dementia patients. Brilliant. Brilliant. And by the way, there's some truth to that. In fact, he should, because I actually think that the biggest risk to Trump right now going into this debate is that he comes across as too hostile, too mean, or too condescending to Joe Biden. And then all of a sudden, America's hearts go, oh, poor Joe. Poor Joe. He's just a nice guy. He's just an old, nice guy. So actually, Trump has a really difficult position that he's been put in because he's got to kind of sort of treat the guy with kid gloves. And I know you guys are getting mad about that. Oh, he shouldn't. Joe's a big boy too, 81 years old. He got to be able to handle it. But I'm just telling you, like, if he wants to make up that ground with independence, and he's doing a good job already, if he wants to make up that ground with women, and he's doing a good job on that one already too, he's got to make sure that he does not come across as mean. He did this brilliantly back in 2016 when he took on Hillary Clinton, I think in part because in his training, people said to him in the debate prep, remember, she's a woman, she's a mother, she's a grandmother. So as much as you want to go for the jugular, hold yourself back a little bit. And he did. And it was fantastic. He was funny. He was empathetic. He was spot on with many points. And so maybe he just needs to think of Joe Biden as an old woman, right? Fragile, old woman.